Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with all of you. Again, my name is Amit Joshi. I'm going to be talking about practical aspects of AI. I'm going to be talking about what I've seen with actual implementation of some of these amazing, potentially life-changing techniques that I have seen around the world. And hopefully that's going to help you folks in Africa and beyond make use of this technology in a practical way so that you can start extracting value from it. So with that said, let's get started. We all know this, right? We all know that businesses around the world are utilizing, they're implementing artificial intelligence, machine learning at an increasingly rapid rate. Just between 2017 and 2019, this is obviously before the pandemic hit, the number of companies that reported using some form of AI more than doubled. And of course, once the pandemic clears, we are sure that there'll be even more companies doing it. Here's the problem with this, right? Here's the problem. So far in this conference, we have been extremely lucky to hear from some absolute experts on artificial intelligence and machine learning, people who are brilliant, people who do this thing for a living. These are scientists who invent a lot of the techniques that folks use. The problem is that most of the managers who actually implement these techniques are not those scientists. So this is a result from a survey that we ran at AMLD during one of my programs. This is a survey that goes out to senior executives of big and small companies all around the world. And what you see here is a large number of them are extremely confused about AI. A large number of them, they know what it is, they know it can be useful, but they really don't know how to apply it. They don't know exactly what AI means. There's too much hype and misinformation around the concept of artificial intelligence and machine learning in the real world. Remember, what we've got to think about here is a reality check. Artificial intelligence is indeed an absolutely amazing technology, right? Multiple thought leaders have called it the new electricity. This is something that has the potential to change the way we do things, potential to impact humanity, potential to solve a lot of our big problems. The reality, however, right? The problem with this is that there is a massive difference between what AI can do in a lab and what AI can actually implement in reality. There's a huge gap between the kinds of things that we are capable of implementing in a lab versus the kinds of things that are practically possible on the ground in the real world. And you're asking, okay, where does this gap come from? Why cannot we not implement things that are so possible in the lab out in the real world? And these gaps could be technical, they could be practical, they could be regulatory. The simplest example of a regulatory gap that most of us understand is the autonomous vehicle. We don't have a perfect autonomous vehicle. We've got one that's really, really good. But even if a perfectly viable autonomous vehicle was available tomorrow, how many countries would immediately let that car be driven on the road? There are ethical issues. Today I could perhaps use machine learning, artificial intelligence to replace several jobs in my organization. Is that the right thing to do? Is it ethical to do that? I might require data, I might require techniques which are inexplicable, which cannot be explained, which might require private data. They're going to help you in the end, but is it ethical to do that? The point I'm trying to make is that while there are a lot of incredible use cases of artificial intelligence, machine learning in the lab, translating that into real life, translating that into practice can often be extremely, extremely hard. So what I have for you today is a simple explanation, right? A simple look at how you can go about implementing AI in a very short, in a very brief way. And I believe that there are three pillars to AI implementation in your organization. Now, you could be a large organization, you could be a small to medium business that's going to use something off the shelf. Does not matter. If you are looking to implement AI and machine learning in Africa, these are the three things you've got to think about: infrastructure, business models, and ethics. Now, I have to be clear, in the amount of time that we have, we are not going to be able to discuss the ethical aspects of it. That's a whole different conversation altogether. And there are experts on ethics who are better suited to discuss that. What I'm going to talk about briefly is, what do I mean by infrastructure for AI? What do I mean by business models, right? So let's understand this. Infrastructure is the underlying tools, the underlying skill sets, the underlying people that you need to have in place before you can actually go ahead and implement machine learning inside your organization. Now, remember, I'm not necessarily talking about massive organizations. You could be a small to medium business. Machine learning can still benefit you, but you still need to have a basic infrastructure layer in order to utilize machine learning. You need to have techniques for gathering and cleaning data. You need to have techniques for utilizing that data in order to train the model. You need to have the right skill sets, the right kind of people who know how to work with this. And now you know this all around the world, perhaps also in Africa, there is typically a shortage of people who are equipped to deal with these kinds of complexities. More importantly, and which I'm sure you have learned from a lot of these other talks already, it is important, if machine learning is to really work, for you to close the loop, for you to implement machine learning, see how it's performing in the market, and then make changes so it keeps on improving. That's where a lot of the ability of machine learning really comes in. From a business model perspective, the question really is, machine learning, super cool technique, super sexy. Are you going to make money with this technique? If you're running a business, if you want to implement this, you probably don't want to implement something just because it's super cool. You want to implement something because it will eventually, hopefully, make you money, right? It'll make your life better. It'll make your employees' life better, your customers' life better. It has to deliver some kind of value. So what exactly is the business model that you're going to utilize for your machine learning techniques? Broadly speaking, I have identified 3 business models that machine learning can be applied to. You can use AI as a substitute, you can use AI as a complement, and finally, you can use AI as a service. Let me explain what I mean exactly by these applications. First of all, AI as a complement. In this particular case, you're going to implement machine learning, you're going to implement AI inside your organization. And the goal is that AI supports your existing jobs. It supports your existing employees. It makes them better. It makes their life easier. This could be in the form of an AI that provides recommendations to salespeople as to what kind of tools they can use to reach out to consumers. This can be an AI that helps call centers, that helps customer service agents better understand customers. One of my favorite examples is this company called Zebra Medical, which markets its AI, which can do radiology scans, not as a replacement for radiologists, but as the cheapest second opinion in the world. Someone has gone to the hospital to get a scan. The doctor says, hey, congratulations, your scan has come out clean. By the way, would you like to spend $1 to get a second opinion from an AI, which is incredibly accurate, so that we are almost certain that this scan is true? That's it. That's their business model. What is AI doing here? It is not replacing anyone. It is backing you up. It is making your job easier. It's making your job better. A level above that is when you can use AI as a substitute. You can actually try and use AI to replace a task previously done by humans. Now, I'm not saying you replace the human itself, because that's a tricky thing, but you can certainly think about replacing tasks done by the humans using AI. What could be some examples of this? Well, think about it this way. You have people monitoring security centers. Now, these could be security centers at factories, at business places, at residences. So far, we've always had humans manning those, right? How about we use machine learning to train the cameras so that it's no longer just humans monitoring this, but it's humans with the help of machines to better identify problems, to better identify security threats. This would be the example of AI substituting away some of the tasks that humans normally do. Humans no longer have to do the tasks. They can focus on the more complicated, the more difficult tasks, which AI perhaps is not able to manage. So with AI as a substitute. Finally, if you are a very high-end organization when it comes to AI, you basically can offer your own AI capabilities as a business. And this is essentially what folks like Amazon Web Services or Google with TensorFlow or Azure with Microsoft, that's essentially what these folks are doing, right? So AI as a complement, AI as a substitute, and AI as a replacement or AI as a service. These are the basic business models. Now, how do you decide what type of problems within your organization are best suited for the application of AI? Because one other thing which companies really struggle with is what kind of problems shall I use AI for? Where is AI best suited from a practical perspective versus where AI is going to be a waste of money? Here's a simple way to think about this, right? Can you clearly define the end goal that you're trying to achieve? Or you cannot define the end goal? How clearly, how objectively can you define your end goal? That's the first question I have for you. The second question, of course, an example of clearly defining your goal is playing chess, right? You ask anyone what is the goal in chess, they'll tell you, oh, it's checkmate. Super simple. An example of an unclear goal is improving the culture of your organization. It's very difficult to exactly understand what culture is. It can mean many different things and so on and so forth. Second thing is, how quickly do you get feedback from the environment on your decision? Do you get feedback very, very quickly, or do you get feedback very, very slowly? Think about it. You get a recommendation to watch a movie on Netflix. You either watch it or you don't watch it, or you start watching it, you don't really like it. Netflix gets pretty quick feedback whether its recommendation is working or not. Versus something like evaluating health and wellness. Well, I might only know after many, many years whether my recommendation was working with this particular person. Now, based on these four conditions, here is exactly what I recommend on how AI should be used. If you have clear goals with quick feedback, AI can be used for automation. You can use AI as a complement, you can use AI as a substitute. If you have clear goals, but the feedback from the environment is very slow, you might want to use AI to provide you with recommendation. AI is going to be used to narrow down the amount of choices that you have to search through. On the flip side, if the goals are unclear, but feedback is very quick, you want to use AI for provocation. Now, in this case, you want to use AI to expand your horizons, to think of alternatives you might not have thought about previously. Finally, if the goals are not clear and if feedback is too slow, I would avoid using AI altogether. This is a tricky area. This is where a lot of organizations spend a lot of money trying to implement AI, but they don't succeed and they end up wasting money. A great example of this is IBM's Watson, right? In terms of examples of these four, think about providing personalized discounts, right? Look, when I would give personalized discount, I know exactly what my goal is. My goal is to get you to purchase, and I know relatively quickly whether you've gone to the store and purchased my product or not because you've used my discount coupon. It's a great example of personalizing coupons. You can use AI. If the goal is clear, think about identifying money laundering. I know exactly this transaction is money laundering, that transaction is not money laundering. However, the feedback for whether or not that is money laundering can sometimes take a really long time. Oftentimes, whether it's money laundering or not is decided by governments. It can take sometimes months before the government comes back and say, you know, that transaction from 6 months ago, that was money laundering. In this case, what you want to do is you want to use AI to narrow down, saying, hey, look, of these million transactions that took place, these 950,000 were all fine. I would focus on this small subset that might be money laundering. On the other side, if goals are unclear, but feedback is relatively quick, think about providing design or creative ideas. Think about people who are in the advertising sector. They want to come up with cool ideas. You can use AI to generate new ideas that you and I could not have thought about. And finally, the top right corner, the red corner, if you're looking to hire senior people, very, very hard to do that using AI. If you're trying to solve a really complicated problem like cancer, like I mentioned with IBM Watson, really, really hard to do that with AI. So with one eye on the clock, I know I want to give some time for questions. Here are the three things to keep in mind. Number one, right? Do you have the infrastructure backbone to actually implement AI and machine learning in your organization? Please remember, the developments that you're hearing in the lab are amazing. They're fascinating. They're going to change the world. However, before you can implement them in your business, it takes a certain level of understanding. It takes a certain level of investment. It is not very straightforward to just take things from the lab and implement them in real life. Real life is messy. Make sure you have the right infrastructure. Make sure you're using the right business models to ensure that you're making money with AI. You probably don't want to use AI as a vanity project just because it's fun or because it's cool. Most organizations don't have money lying around just to use AI for fun. You want to eventually add value with AI. Make sure AI is adding value. And I know we did not cover this in this particular context, but make sure you're doing all of this ethically. Remember, clear goals, quick feedback. That's what you want if you want to implement AI successfully. That's what I have for you. I would like to open it up for questions, thoughts, and comments. Looking forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amit, for the interesting talk. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So there's a question about, I mean, technology is widely used by individuals around us. So we all have phones. Most of us have access to the internet. How can we as a society understand ML more and make it more facilitated?
So I think it's a valid question. I think the important thing to do, especially with machine learning, is to get knowledge from the right sources. And the reason I say that is there is too much misinformation and there's too much hype going on around machine learning, right? I was listening to some of your previous speakers, and these are brilliant people who know this thing inside out. Listen to them. Listen to what they're saying. AI is mathematics. AI is statistics. AI is computer science. If you read normal popular press, if you read a newspaper, they make it sound like AI is magic, right? They make it sound like, oh, you know, AI is killer robots and things like that. It is none of that thing. So please make sure you're getting the right information from the right source. It's a super simple recommendation from my part, but it's amazing how many even top executives are not doing that today.
I agree. We've talked about so the three, let's say, pillars that should be tackled in Africa, which are ethics, infrastructure, and business models. Right? These what we need to focus on in this present time. But we haven't really spoken about the ethical values. We as data scientists or computer scientists or mathematicians need to have when we deliver solutions. I mean, at the end, you mentioned AI as a substitute that substitutes tasks for individuals, but many times these tasks that the individuals are doing are more or less the primary task of the job. And the AI as a substitute will eventually take over the job because as a business, you don't want to pay someone who has minor tasks to do. And what are the ethical questions surrounding that topic? Because in my opinion, even though AI might take jobs, it also creates jobs on the other hand.
It does. I mean, this is a very, very tricky situation. It's a very tricky balance to get, right? Replacing of jobs is just one of the many concerns with AI. There are many other ones, including, you know, what kind of data am I getting? How much privacy am I giving you? What about your security? Am I using AI even for the right thing, or am I using it to basically extract more money from you while making my life better? There are so many aspects to this. Let me give you a broad perspective of this, of how I view ethics in AI. If your organization is simply following the laws, if it's simply following the rules that are written, it's probably not being very ethical. Quite simply because the rules that are written for AI are always going to be out of date because AI is moving too rapidly. If all you're doing is following rules, you're probably, overstepping the line in some way. What you need to think through as an organization, from the perspective of employment, from the perspective of the right data collection, from the perspective of doing right by your employees and by your customers, is what are my internal benchmarks when it comes to ethics, and not what the law is telling me to do. If all you're doing is following the law, you're probably not doing something right. What are my internal benchmarks that I will not cross? And then make sure, even if you're losing money, that you don't cross those benchmarks. That's the best definition of ethics I can give with an AI.
I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, the ethical values that people have, um, most of the companies would just rather make money, right, and put these ethical values aside. But these, in the end of the day, these ethical values are the ones that come from the executive people in the companies that do take these positions, and they take the decisions. Sorry. We have another question from the audience. So the inputs on business models are very interesting, but they seem relevant mostly for larger companies. How do these thoughts apply to small enterprises, startups in the less developed African economies?
So what I have seen with smaller companies, especially in places like Asia, South America, to a certain extent, to a certain small extent, Africa, is they tend to use, which is the right thing to do, by the way, they tend to use a lot of off-the-shelf use cases of AI, right? Typically supervised learning off the shelf, to use AI as a complement. And I believe that's the right place to start. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of free resources with respect to machine learning that are already available. Adopt those. You will typically end up adopting those to help people who are already doing a certain job, unlikely to be replaced, okay? But it's still going to add a ton of value to your organization. So my recommendation for those in small to medium businesses, especially in places like Africa, would be to very strongly look at AI as a complement, not as AI as a substitute, definitely not AI as a business model in itself. That's very high end. Look at AI as a complement. Look at how you can make the life internally of your own employees better, of your own life as the owner of a small business better, using some of these techniques, even in a small way, and then scale them slowly. That would be my recommendation.
I agree. So AI as a complement, I think, is one of the better solutions for the African development, because at the end of the day, you don't want to set aside people who are working for these jobs. And maybe with these advancements, you help the economy, but overall, you don't really help the people. I have a question regarding you showed a plot about the confusion of machine learning and artificial intelligence regarding managers and people in executive positions. Why do you think that is the case? Because what I see now from companies is that they're always opening AI, they're always introducing and hiring data scientists, etc. But how does this reflect on the fact that most of these executives are confused by artificial intelligence?
So I think it's a combination of two facts, right? A lot of the people who are in leadership positions today, extremely competent people, very smart people from all around the world, they typically had their training, especially technical training, a few decades ago. If you're leading a company, small, medium, large enterprise company all over the world, it's possible that you're 20 or 25 years old. It's more likely you're 40, 50, or 60 years old. If you're in the second bracket, you possibly had been 15, 20, 30 years when you got your training, maybe some technical training. A lot of that is relatively outdated today, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing which is happening is exactly what I said. A lot of the coverage around machine learning in popular press is very misleading. It's very misleading. They take, and at certain extent, it's understandable. They're in the business of eyeballs and clicks, essentially. So they're probably not going to talk about the more practical, relevant aspects of AI. They're going to talk about the extreme aspects of AI, saying, okay, how this one little experiment managed to recreate something which might be impossible in the lab, or how this experiment failed dramatically, and therefore AI is very scary. The coverage around AI is not balanced, right? Like a lot of other coverage, you might argue. And those are the reasons I find for this.
I agree, but in a sense, the people in these executive positions should not be swayed by the topics discussed in the media, right? At the end of the day, they are the ones who take these calls.
So the other thing that happens is, especially, this is especially true for very senior levels, is once you're at a relatively senior level, a lot of people, especially in a public forum, they're a little hesitant to put their hand up and say, hey, I really don't understand AI. Can you explain this to me? Right? Not in the context of AI, but I remember some time ago, I was running working with some very senior executives from a very, very large, famous company. And in the break, a couple of executives took me aside and said, if you don't mind me, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. Can you just explain to me what the cloud is? I have no, I mean, I've heard about it so much. I know it's important, but can you explain to me what the cloud is? And I think this is representative, right? They are expected to know a lot. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of things are changing very rapidly. And that's where the gap comes in between what we expect them to know versus what they know and how much they can ask.
One last question from my side, actually. So you've mentioned that as a business, we need to make sure how do we make money with this machine learning technology and what are the monetizing schemes. Do you think that simpler machine learning solutions are the way to go, or is it more that we move toward the more complex deep learning topics, neural networks, etc.?
I would say for now, especially in economies like Africa, especially small to medium business, simpler is better, right? Simpler tools, simpler mechanisms are more easily implementable from an infrastructure perspective, from a management perspective. They're often more explainable than any of the deep learning or neural networks, right? You're going to have a pain with explainability when it comes to a lot of these other more complex techniques. Simplest is best. I always recommend start simple, start with multiple projects. Don't start with one project. Start with lots of small projects. Some will fail, some will succeed. Scale the ones that succeed, but always start simple.